Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the RSA. And Jerry, thank you to you and to Matthew and to everyone here who's organized today's event. This is a suitably digital location to be talking about the digital economy. First of all, a slight apology for kind of keeping you locked up in this room. One of my officials did suggest, actually, that this might be the definition of progress, which was to get the entirety of the media, technology, and telecoms press pack and then lock them up in a room permanently. And that might mean we might get a better reception tomorrow. But we have been, I think, rightly insistent that Parliament hears it first. And so Parliament will, as Jerry said, this game doesn't start till the elected representative speaks, and we will see that in real time. So on that basis, absent fires, there are no exits anywhere for any of you, and it would be good if you could refrain from emailing your best friends and news editors, if they are different things, to tell them what you have read. The first thing to say is that we have already spotted an error. I was going to play a little sort of bit of audience participation in this new participative digital age we all live in and see if anyone else has spotted the error or possibly found another one. Anyone want to tell me the error they've spotted? Oh, no, that's just bad. That's not an error. That's poor quality. The error is in, I think, on page 93, where there is a table where we have, you don't need to look it up, honestly, it is wrong. Where we have inverted the legend, and we talk about the way in which digital radio is going, and so that is wrong. So I apologize for that, but I think I'm sure there'll be more than one error, despite multiple proofreadings over the weekend. It doesn't matter how many times you look at these things, you will always find some error, and so prizes for those of you who find real errors. Apart from, as opposed to just badly written English. But I think critically, from our point of view as a government, we don't think there are errors in the recommendations. We have spent quite a lot of time and quite a lot of effort getting to where we've got to. And whilst there may be some of you who I'm sure will disagree with some or all of what we say, either individually or collectively, from our perspective as government, we have got there for very considered and specific reasons. And perhaps we might, in the Q&A, get a chance to talk about why that is what it is. And the final thing I'll say is it's a romping good read at 9 chapters and 240 pages and multiple annexes. But I know if this room is roughly 50-50 male to female, there is at least half the audience who, like me, aren't terribly good at multitasking. So I'm going to ask you just to put the document to one side and for the next 15 minutes and just let me talk at you, because you'll have plenty of time to then read the detail of it. And then just let me take you through what we think we're trying to do. And then perhaps we can go back to the detail of the text, and you can tell me that if that's what we're trying to do, we're clearly failing, or if that's what we're trying to do, then we have succeeded. Three contextual points from me. The first one is, as I said in the Financial Times this morning, this is unashamedly what it is, which is it is a piece of what I would describe as market-facing, market-friendly industrial policy in an industrial sector. And it doesn't try to be anything other than that. That's what the purpose of the report was. It was why it was commissioned. It's what we have set out to do, which is take a view of the market and to take a view of the challenges and then see where, if there is a role for government and public policy, how that can be best exercised. Secondly, it doesn't have industrial interest or institutional interest at its heart, which doesn't mean that we have not paid attention to industrial or institutional interests, because you rightly should, not least because many of those deliver enormous benefits. But in instances, we have taken decisions which are either against some industrial interest or against some institutional position. But we have done that because, in our view, that is in ultimately the consumer's interest. If you define the consumer's interest as greater access, greater content, higher quality, competition for quality, more innovation, higher levels of universality, and public service in the market. And the third thing I would say is do try, if you're interested in the subject, and read the entire document. Because whilst there will be individual bits of it that may well be particularly pertinent to you, we have tried to look at it in the round, and it is worth looking at individual decisions in the round, because a decision in one area does actually have a very direct effect on another. And if you look at it in isolation, you can see it in a particular way. So what does it seek to do? The first thing is, this is the first publication you will see from the government in its program of building Britain's future. So over the next 4 to 6 weeks, you will see a series of publications and pieces of policy work in different areas, of which this is only one. But in its area, it seeks to do 3 things. It says, first of all, we unequivocally take the view that the digital economy is central to the industrial capability of the UK. And if you take that view, and you take the view that it is central to our future as well as current competitiveness, there are then a series of decisions that flow from that. Secondly, we assert the view, and then try in summary to provide the analysis, that we need to start, therefore, looking at our communications infrastructure in the same way as we have traditionally looked at our, for example, transportation infrastructure. And so we try to take a soup-to-nuts view of where we stand as a country at the moment on everything from fixed-line traditional telephone networks all the way through to next-generation mobile networks and interleave white spaces, the future of digital television, the future of digital radio, and the remainder. So there is an end-to-end view that the communications infrastructure needs to be put on the same platform as any country would sensibly look at any other core piece of infrastructure. And to that end, we propose giving a new duty to the sectoral regulator to provide a biannual update to the government on the state of the national communications infrastructure, including our position on network resilience, national security, network capabilities at all layers of the network, so the access point, the transit point, and further and deeper into the network. So it does those 2 things. Firstly, unashamedly says we think the digital economy is central to the country's industrial competitiveness, and secondly says, if you take that view, you have to start from the premise of what is our communications infrastructure capability today, assess it, and then take a view about what you would like it to be over the period. And then thirdly, it says, if those 2 things are true, you have to have a driven policy to maximize digital participation. You cannot have, not just for reasons of social justice, which I think are overwhelming, you cannot have a structure where 20, 30, 40% of the population are not participating, are not engaging, are not receiving the benefits, are not receiving the educational development. Now, most of you in this room, I suspect, are in the fortunate position of, in fact, why don't we do a little bit of audience participation? Hands up in the room, who has an internet connection at home? Keep your hands up, if you don't mind. I know it's a slightly warm room, but if you use the internet and connectivity regularly at work, virtually 100% overlap. Now, there's a significant proportion of the population for whom neither of those things are true. A, they do not have an internet connection and connectivity at home, and secondly, they're not in the fortunate position that you and I are in of being in a working environment where they're compounding their learning and experience by a daily engagement with those technology benefits and skills. And that is not an acceptable place to be. So there is a suite of recommendations in the report that talk about how do you drive the levels of digital participation up in order that you don't leave yourself in a position where significant portions of the population are left occupying a different life experience and work experience from that this room very unrepresentatively demonstrates here today. We have talked to lots of people, and just looking at this room, even in this moody lighting, we have talked to quite a number of you here, in some instances on quite a number of times. And all of them have been deeply rewarding exchanges. And we have had significant engagement. The quality of the responses to the interim report, I say in some instances, far exceeded the quality of the interim report. And the demand for us to go further, deeper, rounder, to try and provide a coherent 360-degree picture of the importance of this sector was made very, very clear to us from that consultation process. We've had multiple meetings here in London and across the country. We have throughout the process been guided and advised by the steering board, some of whom are here today, who have given generously of their time and their smarts, and from my perspective, I would very much like to put my gratitude for that on the record. But these are government's recommendations. I said at the very beginning to the steering board that they should feel free to express their own view of the final report, and clearly they will do that. And these are the opinions of the government, having gone through that process of engagement and consultation. As you read through the report, it covers these areas. Am I on if I go off? I am, aren't I? Can I move from the lectern? Is that all right for the camera? And it's worth wandering around it, because we have tried to look at each and all of these issues in the report. It comes in 9 chapters. These are not sequential with the chapters, but in the way in which I think of them, which is, if you start with communications infrastructure, there's a significant body of work on communications infrastructure, where we start with an assessment of its importance, and then we run through an analysis of where we are today on fixed networks, where we would like to be, where we are today on mobile, where we'd like to be, where we are today in television, where we'd like to be, where we are in radio, where we'd like to be. Then we go into the questions of participation and engagement and try and give some analysis of why we have higher levels of engagement in some levels of the population in some areas, because it varies, interestingly, significantly by geography. And we then make some statements about access and universality. We commit to the universal delivery of broadband connectivity for the 1.5 million homes who don't have either anything or what we judge to be a base level of connectivity, 2 megabits. And a number of people have, since the publication of the interim report, poured somewhere between, what's the word I'm searching for? Scorn on that as an ambition. Let me put on the record, there is no other country in the world that has got that as an enshrined ambition. We have done significant work across Europe to change the European legal framework, the Universal Services Directive, to give us the legal power to be able to do it. We are not saying that 2 megabits is the height of our ambition. We are, as I've said in previous forums, describing it as the sort of technological minimum wage, because we think it is a level of connectivity that allows people to access the sort of services that we want. We lay out in the report how we will fund the delivery of that through a combination of government investment, commercial tender, the extension and change to the mobile licenses, the use of the digital switchover underspend, and that we will do that through an independent network procurement and design process. And then we talk about next generation networks, both in fixed and in mobile. And we say that we believe the case is very clearly made for the importance for any knowledge economy to have next generation network capability, both in fixed and mobile. They're complementary. And it is clear from the evidence and the analysis that the market looks very likely to either already be providing or to provide somewhere between 50 and 60, 65% coverage of next generation fixed connectivity. But on all the analysis we have seen, we have commissioned, and has been laid out around the world, there is no evidence that there are any economic cases to build out new fixed networks on the payback levels that the models will currently give you without some form of intervention. And so we recommend a very simple device, a 50 pence per fixed copper line levy on every line, which will, we believe, based on our analysis, produce between 150 and 175 million pounds a year of seed corn funding, which we will use as a means of subsidizing market build-out of fiber networks to the remainder of the population. In mobile networks, we lay out a program of spectrum liberalization, auction packaging, auction release timetable, license change and license liberalization, all of which we believe will do in mobile networks what we are saying we will achieve in the fixed networks. So if you go forwards to come backwards, our view is that within 4 or 5 years' time, we could, on that basis, see ourselves in a situation where we have full universal access to today's broadband, a full extension of fiber networks to 90% of the population with a fixed capability, and third-generation mobile extended to the same levels of coverage as GSM coverage, which is, for all intents and purposes, universal, and the post-auction deployment of fourth-generation mobile. So there's a significant set of recommendations around the access to and universal reach of communications infrastructure. Within that, as a sidebar, and it's an important sidebar, and this is true of a lot of the report because there are quite a lot of important individual issues, we also make a commitment to the digital upgrade of radio to DAB by 2015. And we take the view, which came back very firmly from the consultation, that government expressing an ambition wasn't enough, that the market and the consumers wanted certainty. Were we or were we not going to fund and change the framework to allow radio to have its own dedicated digital transmission network? Not because we don't think radio will be distributed in multiple forms, clearly it will. But do we believe radio justifies its own digital network? And we've taken the view that it does, and that that network should be a DAB network, and that to achieve that, you need a date, and we've given a date, the end of 2015, and you need a program of change that makes that a reality rather than an ambition. So you need to change the regulatory framework, you need to change the licensing framework, you need to change the multiplex framework, you need to build out the network, and you need to bring the industry to you and the supply chain and the car manufacturers to you in a way that upgrades the receivers and lowers the price to make it affordable. And clearly, in the same ways we did in digital television, we will have to put in place a mechanism for support and help for those people who find that a challenging process. So a commitment to universal delivery of today's broadband, a funding mechanism for next-generation fiber networks, a liberalization and accelerated rollout of next-generation mobile networks, and a target date and a program and legislative change to allow radio to go to digital. And as you all in this room already know, television is already en route. Even if you got all of that right, it wouldn't be worth much, as many of the poets in the room tell me, if we didn't have anything to do, anything to distribute on those networks. And that leads neatly into the questions of digital content and rights protection. Or put another way, what is our view of what capabilities we should have in this country beyond what the market will provide anyway for the sort of content that we would want to produce? And there we make a series of interventions. We are also simultaneously publishing today the response from the OFT on the market guidance for the media mergers regime for the newspaper market, where there have been significant representations and economic evidence analysis from the newspaper industry that the drive to digital is having a significant effect on the ability of newspaper businesses, particularly in the local market, to be able to make the economic investments they need to be able to run quality newspapers. We recommend the introduction of a new evidence test for Ofcom, a so-called local media assessment, to be able to inject into that competition analysis an appropriate level of plurality. And we also asked the Audit Commission to look at the market impact of so-called free sheets, which are of course not free sheets, they're paid for by the local taxpayer, and what is the effect that they're having on the local newspaper market. So we make some very specific recommendations on the content arena to do with newspapers. In relation to public service broadcasting, we say a number of things. In relation to the Channel 3 licenses for ITV PLC and Channel 5, we essentially say we're at the point whereby beyond what I would describe as the economic regulatory levers, which are largely the production quotas, we should aim for liberalization of those markets. And we will take the legislative powers to bring forward the revaluation of those licenses by Ofcom, which will require us to take an affirmative order through both houses. And we will also, in our view, believe that Ofcom has the powers already to release ITV and Channel 5 from its other public service license obligations beyond the production quotas. And if they don't, we're happy to look at that question and give them legislative air cover if they need it. We also say that there is clearly a question in relation to the provision of regional news, and in particular news in the nations and the regions. That's slightly related also to the local newspaper markets, one of those examples where there is next-door connectivity. And there, after much debate and discussion, we have taken the view that the case is made, in our view, for introducing contestability to the license fee. Or if you step back from that, we take the view that the case is made to make available public funding for the provision of news in the nations and the regions. It is not our view as a government that that should come out of the general exchequer. It's not our view as the government that it should take a primary call on the public purse ahead of any other public service. It is our view that we have a funding mechanism for public content. It is called the television license fee. And it is currently the case that in the main, the majority of that goes to one institution, the vast majority of it. There is a portion, 3.5% of it in simple numbers, that goes to the digital switchover scheme, and we propose that that element should be retained after 2013, whatever happens to the level of the license fee. So this isn't a debate, as some people have characterized it in the newspapers, as a do you reduce the license fee or do you not? There may be a decision to reduce the license fee. That, frankly, will be a decision that will be taken then by the government of the day. But whatever the level of the license fee, we are posing the question as to whether or not it is acceptable to introduce a contestable element, and we propose what that should be and where it should go. Now, we are consulting on this in an open but I think pretty clear manner as to where the government is for two reasons. Not because we have buckled in the face of BBC lobbying pressure, as has been portrayed in some newspapers, but because this is a significant public policy question. It is the first time that the license fee would be diverted from the BBC as the sole provider of public content to other sources. That is not a small decision, it's a big decision. The government is clear that on balance that is our view, but we wish to consult on it. And let me be clear, we're not holding a referendum on the question either. We are consulting on it. And we will seek people's views, including that of the BBC Trust and Ofcom, both of whom have institutional responsibilities in this area, and the views of other people in the market. And we are very clear that we will find a funding solution. And if other people have other ideas of a funding solution, we're in the market to listen to them. Additionally, in relation to public content, we also say that as it relates to Channel 4, we do accept the view presented by the Channel 4 board that because Channel 4 essentially is a non-rights owning single country commissioning broadcaster that is largely funded by advertising inventory, it's a business model facing some significant commercial pressure. I think it would be fair to say that this process has highlighted that Channel 4 can, through a significant series of its own steps, look after itself significantly. But notwithstanding that, we have indicated that we are willing, if the parties in this instance being BBC Worldwide and Channel 4 can come to commercial terms, we are willing as a government to facilitate that transaction through the provision of an extended borrowing facility to the BBC. We're not going to force, this is not a forced marriage. If the board of the BBC and the board of Channel 4 do not wish to do this deal, the deal will not happen. If they wish to do that deal on commercial terms, the government will facilitate it. And we very clearly in the report lay out why we have rejected the other options for intervention in relation to Channel 4. Then in relation to content and rights, which has been a very hotly contested question, how do you provide a framework for the protection of content in the digital world? And there are many views in this room, and there are many people who feel passionately about this, who sit on both ends of the spectrum. There is the counsel of despair, nothing can be done, it's the world we're moving into, it's unstoppable, it's a truth. The content owners and the rights owners merely need to recognize they're in a new world, naming no names, for now. And there are other people who say that this is a tragedy, this is a creative global warming which is decimating an industrial capability that is unique to the United Kingdom, and if we were any other government in the world, we would have already moved faster, harder, and quicker to protect it, naming no names for now. We, I would say, on balance, are nearer the latter. We have taken a very firm view as a government that we share the view that piracy of intellectual property is wrong. In criminal terms, it is theft. In civil terms, it is plain wrong. And we say that we will give Ofcom the power to lay an obligation on ISPs, who effectively are as near as you can get to a control mechanism, notwithstanding the Council of Despair. In the first instance, to run a notification regime, but in the second instance, and we specify, both in a change to their primary duties and in the mechanism as to how it will work, how that will then trigger the use of technical measures to allow the regulator to require the ISPs to move to more significant control if there has not been a marked reduction, and we put a target in the level of digital piracy. There is then a significant section of the report, which I'm not going to go into now in the interest of time so we can get to questions, which deals with consumer protection issues, public services, and importantly, how the government acts as a procurer of services, some recommendations on the changes in the way in which the government procures ICT services, a recommendation on a program of what we call the digital switchover of public services between now and 2012, where we lay out a clear set of criteria and objectives for that. And then there is a section in the report entitled Digital Security, where we look at what we describe as the 3 tiers of security in this fully digital world, which is the international issues, which are largely institutional questions of organizational structures, about how the internet is resourced and governed, and the interrelationship between the emerging countries in the East and North America and Europe, down to what we do as a country in national security to protect ourselves against cybercrime and international e-crime, down to domestic security. What do we do as individuals to provide ourselves with the necessary level of personal security in the way in which our lives will be conducted in that fully digital world? So it moves around and then concludes at the end with a chapter entitled Delivering Digital Britain, which makes it, I hope, very clear how this report will be delivered. The recommendations divide essentially into 3 categories: 26 outcomes, 26 proposals, and 25 recommendations. The outcomes are decisions. They will happen. The proposals require either some form of additional technical work or some form of consultation or some change in an existing allocation of responsibility. And the recommendations are things that require us either to take completely new legislative powers, and you'll hear more about that in the publication of the draft legislative program next week from the government, or require us to go into a more detailed piece of formal consultation. So that's as near as I can get to summarizing it from our perspective. And I'm very, very happy to take questions. Thank you very much for putting the book aside.